as you probably gathered, my name's Andrew Nicholson. I'm one half of the dynamic duo Andy and Di. We're normally very much a team, and we do most of the work we do together, but we're here down from Inverness. We haven't got lots of helpers with us, so Di's keeping half an eye, I understand. So, accelerated personalised development, what's it all about? This is the result of our joint personal development journey over the last 12 years. And I want to share with you really what that journey looked like a little bit, because there'll probably be some parallels with your own journeys or the journey you've got to come, because you're here presumably to learn things and try some new stuff. And I'll share with you some of the key lessons that we've learned along the way, which hopefully will help you to accelerate your process. So I'm going to just talk about that timeline to start with. And Di and I got together about 9 years ago. So to start with, we were on our own personal development journeys individually, and then we got together and we did the rest of the journey together. And actually being together was a key part of accelerating that, because there's nothing like having somebody there to reflect yourself back to you to keep it real. Because it's very easy to think you're doing well when you're on your own, and perhaps kidding yourself a little bit. So what happened was, probably not unlike some people, if you're of my tender age, I'm getting on for 52 this year. Back in 2004, at the ripe old age of 39, I was having something that some people might have described as a bit of a midlife crisis. I didn't really see it like that then, but I'd been married for 4 years and I was in the process of getting divorced. And I kept going back to a career that I knew I could do and I was comfortable doing. I was doing marketing and market research, but it wasn't really setting my world on fire. And the best thing happened really, I got divorced and I got made redundant. So it might seem a little fearful, but actually I'm sitting there, I haven't got any sort of children to look after or anything like that. I'm sitting there with this wonderful blank sheet of paper, a real genuine opportunity to recreate the life that I wanted. If only I knew what that was. So really, I was just sitting there staring at a blank sheet of paper, scratching my head, and you can see the result of that quite clearly. Something funny happened. I'm a great believer in coincidences, and I bumped into an old friend of mine who I hadn't seen for 3 or 4 years. And my friend said to me, "Andy, you need to do a bit of personal development. You need to get some fresh perspectives on life." And he said, "Well, why don't you go along to the Yes Group?" And we've actually got a London Yes Group here as a stand. And I happened to go to one in Birmingham. And I started going along monthly for about 18 months. And I listened to speakers on all sorts of different topics, as you've got here today. And gradually, the fog and the frustration that I was feeling started to clear a little bit, and I could sort of see some positive opportunities. And one of the biggest opportunities was a talk that I went to on relationships. Now, relationships and my divorce was the biggest cause of my frustration and pain. And the worst thing was that I didn't feel I'd learnt anything from it. So I was quite likely to just go and recreate the same kind of mayhem in my life again if I wasn't very careful. So this relationship workshop that I went to was great. It started to answer a lot of questions, but in truth, it actually asked an awful lot more questions that I clearly hadn't got the answers to. So I took some action. And I went on a longer workshop over a long weekend that they did. And I was so impressed. You remember Victor Kiam, he was impressed with his raise. He was so impressed he bought the company. Well, I didn't buy the company, so it wasn't for sale. And I was penniless because my ex-wife had all my money through the divorce. But what I did do was talk myself into a job. So I actually went and worked at this relationship retreat. It was in Austria for about 20 months, had a great time. I learned a lot of stuff that I needed to know, particularly as a single man. There was some stuff I needed to get my act together. I needed to understand about relationships. I needed to understand about what women wanted and expected, and how to do a better job of delivering it. I started the timeline there at 2004, but actually I'd come across personal development before that, and in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I'd done what perhaps a lot of people do. I'd read some books, gone on a few workshops, but actually nothing had changed. You've all heard the phrase shelf development. I was doing shelf development. I've still got the bookcases to prove it in case anyone doubts me. And I went and trained in NLP as well. Now at this point, Di had come to a crossroads in her life as well. It wasn't quite the same as mine. She was getting divorced as well, but she actually decided to change career completely, and she found life coaching and got really excited by it. So she was training with the Institute of Life Coaches at that time. So I was busy working away at the relationship retreat, and Di, a bit like me, did the fairly traditional path of training in NLP and hypnotherapy. And then she was a big fan of Susan Jeffers' book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Who knows about that? Yeah, it's a famous book, it's great. So Di started teaching that. In fact, she was Susan Jeffers' first ever tutor, licensed tutor worldwide. And then a year later, we met each other, and we actually met online. I was still in Austria, and Di was up in Inverness, which is where we live now. So we had a long-distance relationship for about 6 months. We felt we were soulmates, whatever that means. I think we know now, but we didn't at the time, but we felt it. We obviously needed to do something, and you'll hear people telling you need to take massive action, so we did. And I came back from Austria, and I came down from Inverness, and we stepped up together, and we started our own business. I'll just slip forward a bit, called Connect to Your Potential. And Di was also, at that time, doing training and teaching positive thinking. She also trained in past life regression, and I trained in a thing called prison brain mapping, which is quite interesting. So it's starting to look at why we behave the way we do and how we're all different. And I did some executive coaching. So at the point in about 2010, we kind of reviewed the past 6 years of personal development we'd done and started to sort of repackage it together. And we put together a series of 3 workshops. And we called that, Authentic Transformation. And it followed a structured process. So first of all, you overcame your fears. Secondly, you started to understand who you were. So we used some of the concepts of the neuroscience and PRISM. And we also introduced a thing called the Enneagram. So who here knows what the Enneagram is? Who's come across it? A few hands, not many. It's like the best kept secret in personal development. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about the Enneagram today. I'm going to talk about some of the benefits that it gives you. But Di's going to be doing a talk tomorrow at 3 o'clock in room 6, which is over there. And that's going to be all about the Enneagram, which is all about the 9 ego types and the 9 shadow sides. So you may not like to hear this, folks, but we've all got an ego. We've all got one of those 9 types. And it kind of like is pulling our strings. If you've been seeing any of the posts that we've been doing on the app, you might have seen the guy with the little model who's pulling the strings. And I asked the question, who's pulling your strings? And the answer is, your ego is pulling your strings. So when we first learned about the Enneagram, we read some books, we went on a couple of workshops, and we thought it was fascinating. But again, it probably wasn't life-changing. And I guess we were looking for something that was life-changing. And that happened a couple of years later when we came across one of the original gurus of the Enneagram. He was an 83-year-old gentleman with a walking stick. He had the long white beard. He looked every inch a guru, a lot more than I do. And what this guy didn't know about human behavior wasn't worth knowing. But he still had an ego. He was a type 5. I'm a type 1, Di's a type 2. There are 9 different ego types. His type sometimes gets called the observer. And his real skill was in observing the minutiae of detail of human behavior. And he understood the Enneagram, he brought it back into the modern world. It's about 3,000 years old. It was based on observation of human behavior and what appeared to be 9 different models of human behavior. And this chap was the absolute best observer of this and made the most sense of it. So we spent 7 days training with him, and it was a massive wake-up call, because for the first time, we met our egos. So who wants a really pleasant experience in their personal development? Yeah? Do you all want to do something nice and rosy and warming and positive and comforting? That's your ego talking. The last thing your ego wants to do is face up to your ego. So it will play all sorts of tricks with you to try and avoid that. But actually it's the most liberating thing you can do. Because if you think about your potential, if you think about relationships, we're relationship coaches, the thing that comes between you and your potential, the thing that becomes between you and your relationships is your ego. And until you can identify it accurately and you can learn how to master it, it's going to sit there sabotaging you because it wants to keep you in your safe zone. And your safe zone is what you know, so it keeps you stuck. So if you can identify your ego, learn to master it, you can really liberate yourself. And that's what we did for ourselves as a couple. Now, when I met Di, she came down to live with me in Warwickshire, but her heart was in Inverness. She'd been living there for 20 years. It's a fantastic place. So in 2013, we moved back up to Inverness. And again, we took stock of everything we'd learned. We took stock of what we'd learned with the real Enneagram. And we realized that we created a process. It had taken us 12 years to get there, but we call it accelerated personalized development. So I'm going to break that down into 3 components and just explain a bit more about how we've arrived at that. And we deliver that in the form of a breakthrough experience, which we'll come on to. So that's our personal development timeline, but it kind of asks the question, well, what does your personal development timeline look like? And what's it going to look like in the future? What's it going to look like when you go away from the Best You exhibition? Do you have an idea? Do you have a framework? Do you have a plan? So you kind of need to know where you are now and where you want to get to and why. And a big part of that is you need to know, who am I now as well? So most people get into personal development because they've got a problem they want to solve, or maybe they've got an opportunity they want to take. So I wanted to solve the problem of not going and getting into another relationship that ended up in mayhem and divorce. And I wanted to find the opportunity to find myself and have a better life and grow and prosper. So people tend to kind of find various solutions, and some of them are promoted as a sort of panacea for your life, and others are more specific. But really, it's all very disjointed, and somewhere in there is you, and you've got to try and work out how to fit yourself to all of these solutions. And I can tell you, it's not that easy. And it can leave you feeling a bit like this, pushed and pulled in different directions. It takes a lot of time and resource sometimes, and you start to wonder maybe, where's my return on investment here? Am I going in a definite direction and getting lots of benefits, or am I kind of running around in circles a little bit and getting a bit ragged? So it doesn't have to be like that. It's never going to be perfect, but when you really get to master this thing here yourself, you can start to set off in a much more meaningful and fruitful direction in life and in your personal development. And that starts to look something like this. And this is really the key to accelerating your growth and your personal development. So what we've done with our process is we've taken some of the key elements there, and we show people how they all fit together, because they're not random pieces, they all fit together, and they paint a picture like this jigsaw here, and that picture, that jigsaw, is you. So our approach, as it says there, is unapologetically holistic, because you need to get the big picture here. You need to understand who you are, what makes you tick. You need to make sense of that in terms of the direction you want to go in life and the skills and strategies that you need to pick up along the way to make it happen. There are some common threads here. Each of these pieces interacts with each other and influence each other, and they actually tell a common story. So whilst you might say that looks a bit complicated, it actually isn't. We teach this to people over 3 or 4 days, and all the pieces fit very clearly together. You can see the big picture, you can see the patterns, you can see how the thread runs through your physiology and your energy and your beliefs and positive psychology, just as much as you can see how the thread runs through the who you are bit, your personality, what's the right developmental path for you, what does that mean in terms of being in alignment with my values, and what's my meaning and purpose in life. All of these things come together, and it's like a big ha-ha moment. Now, we don't just do that for individuals, we do it for couples. The purple strip down the middle here, you kind of get that from a lot of generic relationship mentoring and training. You'll learn about relationship dynamics, you'll learn about teamwork, you'll learn about communication skills, but most of this is generic teachings. It's not really based on who you are. So when we're working with couples, we take them through our accelerated personalized development process. So in this case, the couple's a heterosexual couple, but it doesn't have to be. So we take him through the pieces of his jigsaw. What makes you tick? What's important to you? what's your direction in life? And we do the same with her. And you're learning about yourselves together. So as you're going on this journey of improving your relationship with yourself, you're actually learning about each other as well. And then what we do is we add in the relationship skills. But all this information in the middle, this gel that glues people together, is personalized to who you both are as two unique individuals. So you're going to be one of those 9 ego types. And the relationship that you create, the right relationship, the optimum relationship, is based on those 2 optimum people coming together and having an optimum relationship. So we're teaching you how that works and what it looks like. So that's accelerated. Personalized we've started to touch on, but you need to know what state you're in. And it's not just about knowing yourself. You're a dynamic concept, you're fluid. You don't get out of bed every morning and behave in exactly the same way. Sometimes we do strange things and surprise ourselves. So you need to actually understand who you are when you're not in such a good state, and also who you are and what's your full potential in a great state. And if you look at the statistics on this, it's very interesting. This research is from 2002, but it's been repeated several times in several different countries, and it's telling the same story. Less than 1 in 5 of us, 17% of the population, consistently achieves a flourishing state of mental health, mental well-being, emotional stability, whatever you want to call it. And those are the people that are probably going to be enjoying relatively high levels of emotional intelligence in their relationships. They've certainly got a better shot at it. Most of us, 54%, the majority, we kind of have our good days and our not so good days, and we're kind of muddling along and doing our best. And then, around a third of people are either languishing, which is kind of like the opposite of flourishing, and they're kind of borderline between that and something worse, which is really where you're struggling to the point that you're probably ending up in your GP's office, and he might be writing your prescription, and he may well be telling you the big 3 are you're depressed, you're stressed, and you're anxious, and you may well be a bit of all 3. So for the vast majority of people who kind of are struggling in life and get to that point, it's gone on for so long that it's really weighing them down, that's where they get to. Now the good news is that the vast majority of those people, that is avoidable if you catch it early enough and you decide to do the kind of process that I'm talking about. It's also, you can recover from it very quickly. So the challenge is a lot of the treatments for these kind of ailments or conditions are treating the symptoms and not the cause. But when you get to the cause, the symptoms go away. Now who's heard of Milton Erickson? Yeah, he's one of the forerunners of a lot of clinical psychotherapy and psychology and NLP. And I love this phrase from Milton: people only have problems because they're out of rapport with their unconscious minds. And you've probably seen the picture of the iceberg, with the tip of the iceberg and then the rest of it's underneath. Well, the bit underneath is our unconscious mind, and it's our ego, and it's what's kind of running the show and running us ragged. And the bit at the top is the bit that we consciously get, which we probably actually don't. We only think we get it, and we can maybe see it. We don't really understand it. So it's a bit of a secret, and you can end up feeling a bit like this, a bit conflicted, and having your good days and your bad days and your challenges. So, how do we resolve this? We talked about the Enneagram. So this is the Enneagram, and Diane's going to be talking about it in a lot more detail in tomorrow's talk at 3 o'clock. But there are 9 very different models of the world. You can't imagine until you really get this at the depth you need to get it, how difficult it is to appreciate just how different we all are. So somebody was asking me on the stand this morning, well, isn't it impossible to walk in somebody else's shoes? They say you've got to walk for a day or a mile or 10 miles in someone's shoes to understand who they are. It doesn't really work like that. You can have my shoes here, give it a go. I don't think you'll be any the wiser. But actually, when you really master the Enneagram, you are able to not only understand your model of the world in great depth, you're starting to understand and appreciate and accept and be able to work with other people's models of the world. So, who here gets rubbed up the wrong way by people? Yeah? Only 2 hands going up. I don't believe you. That's really our egos at play, and it's a clash of the models of the world. So what we do in our process is we make all of this conscious. We said it's unconscious, it's the iceberg underneath the water. So we make the tip of that iceberg much bigger. We bring the iceberg out of the water, all the games that people are playing, all their motivations, their needs, their drives, their personalities. We make you consciously aware of it and your own. And it's massively powerful. Now to me, that is mindfulness. Yeah? You can go and learn mindfulness to quieten your mind down, and that creates a space, and then that space is great, you know? That space will help you to de-stress. I question whether it's really going to help you to know yourself and learn stuff at the depth that I'm talking about. It'll certainly help you to absorb that information, but what we do is make all this conscious for you, and I believe that's the best form of mindfulness. So, you get to master your shadow side, you get to recognize your true potential, you get to identify and recognize the blocks that are coming between you and your potential, and we give you a strategy and a path to resolve those blocks and to accelerate into your potential. We're also giving you a framework and a level of understanding and belief that allows you to trust your intuition. So we all have a really powerful intuition. But the problem is the games that our ego plays and all the monkey minds and the chatter and the chaos that it creates in our mind and the doubt that it creates stops us from believing. It stops us from even hearing our intuition, never mind believing it. So again, learning this quietens your mind down, and it gives you a really good strategy that you can confidently believe in. And in that state of presence, you get to trust your intuition, and you have a better relationship with it. Now, we've been through this process, and we've taken lots of clients through this process, and if you remember my timeline, I didn't start to appreciate any of this until I was about 39. And because nobody laid it out to me very logically, like I hope I'm starting to do for you and like we do for our clients, it took a while for the penny to drop. And it took me probably 3 or 4 years before I really started to get even the need for this, never mind the full solution. And I think it requires us to grow up. So we talk about personal growth, but the truth is our ego is an adolescent being that lives in our head. It's the best way I can put it. And in order to master your ego, you kind of have to put it to one side a little bit and take back responsibility for your own lives and quieten your ego down. And that is, I think, is a growing up process. So I didn't start growing up until 39. I didn't really, I would say I finished the process, but I didn't feel I was doing a good job of it till 3 or 4 years later. But I think with this knowledge and awareness, you can rapidly accelerate that process into months, not years. So the problem is your ego is like they call it the alter ego, doesn't it? It's like an alternative personality. It has kind of a life of its own, and it therefore feels threatened. Its very existence feels threatened by this knowledge and by your authentic self, your soul wanting to come out and take control of the ship, take the rudder, take direction. So part of the growing up process is that you need to put the effort in, you need to not judge yourself too harshly, and you need to embrace the uncertainty of stop being who you have been, run by your ego, and step into the unknown of, well, who am I if I'm not my ego? Because your ego hates that, it doesn't really want to have to make lots of effort and change. It doesn't want to risk getting things wrong, and it hates uncertainty. So the growing up process is you've got to, in my case, man up, put that to one side, and embrace the learning and the being of yourself. And it's kind of nicely depicted there in Maslow's hierarchy. Who knows about Maslow, yeah? He was saying the same thing, and you know, our ego is focused on keeping us safe and fed and housed, And you need to trust that you're going to be able to do that. And it even wants love. But, this is a kind of, can be a desperation, it can be a jealousy, a neediness of love. But actually you cross over into operating from a place of love. And once you can start to operate from a place of love, you let go of the fear-based ego. And that's the springboard to launch you into real self-esteem, authentic self-esteem. And I love that phrase that Maslow came up with, self-actualization. So in essence, what we do is we give our clients permission to be themselves in their own lives and in their relationships, to believe in themselves, trust their intuition, let go of all the limiting beliefs, and, lovely words, understand, surrender, commit, but that's really what it's all about. So that was the journey we went on. Looking back on it, when we moved to Inverness and kind of assessed where we got to, we put it all together into what we call a breakthrough experience. So that's really what we're here promoting this week. And if you want another way of looking at it, I believe what we give people is emotional intelligence. It's something you need to learn. It's been hailed as the most important thing in relationships, in leadership. So for those of you that are in leadership roles, you've probably heard emotional intelligence is really important. The problem is that most of what's written about emotional intelligence is academic. The academics have defined what it is. They've told you why it's really important. They haven't actually told you how to do it, how to achieve it. So I think that's what we've created here. So what are some of the other lessons that we've learned along the way and some of the pitfalls that you can avoid in your journeys? First one is around coaching and goal setting. We're all for coaching and goal setting, but let's be honest about what it does. It allows you to achieve a specific thing in a certain timeline, a SMART goal. But the chances are, once you've achieved that goal, your life probably won't have really transformed greatly. You won't be seeing life completely differently. You'll just have ticked that box, and you might be thinking, well, what's the next goal? And the challenge is that our ego can be the one setting the goals, not our authentic self. So we need to be aware of that. Meditation is great, quieting the mind, we've said is great, but there's a danger that you might be actually denying or avoiding the self or denying the ego and trying to sort of paper over it or walk away from it. And you might be desperately trying to seek personal growth or trying to seek spirituality, but it's a kind of spirituality is a being thing, not a doing thing, so you can't try to do it. And again, your ego will sabotage it. Self-development, that's what I was doing for the first few years. Lots of books and workshops, nothing much changing. But it's really understandable because unless what you're learning has been presented to you in a way where it's clearly in alignment with your personality, with your ego and your model of the world, then there's a big disconnect between the two. So what do? Well, maybe fools rush in. So some of us rush in blindly and just do more workshops and keep positive. And, the chances are we're feeding the ego. Maybe there's some fool's gold in there, and maybe we're running ourselves ragged in that sort of directionless state. But it's possible to do the opposite, and these are all characteristics of specific ego types. So it's equally possible to just be overthinking and over-cynical and to poo-poo everything. I think that's what I was doing when I was doing self-development. I was ticking lots of boxes, yeah, I understand that, but I wasn't really doing it. So you have to take responsibility. And looking for quick fixes from generic solutions that are not tailored to you. So some of the other key lessons, I think I've made this point now, one size doesn't fit all. There are 9 different ego types. There are actually 9 very different paths for transformation and development. And you need to find the one that's right for you, otherwise it's taking you off course and possibly even in the opposite direction to the one you truly need to go on. The ego is like a double-edged sword or 2 sides of a coin. We're all born with an ego type. There's no escaping it. We all have one of the 9 types. Yeah, it gets a bit shaped by our life experience, but it's there. It's not all a bad thing, because the flip side, the other side of the coin, is that we all have some unique gifts and strengths that we can tap into. And those are a direct reflection of our ego type too. So once you understand your ego type, it's not all bad news, and it's not all having to deal with all the bad stuff. It actually illuminates your unique path forward into your true potential. But as I've said, if you're on the wrong path, it can actually be taking you in the opposite direction and actually growing your ego, not growing your authentic self. So being too positive doesn't address what's holding you back. So we come across lots of really positive people, and it can actually be their ego, their pride, their vanity. Those are two of the ego types that are actually making positive thinking and goal setting, all that sort of stuff, sound really good. It fits in with their ego's model of the world. They love it, they feel good, but it's not really serving them. It's actually taking them further into their ego. And equally, there's people who are too negative or cynical or focusing on the problems. And again, we see lots of people that are perhaps from the clinical world, clinical therapists, where we've seen them poo-pooing personal development because they're so focused on the problem and trying to solve the problem that people have, is they don't believe in all this airy-fairy personal development and positive stuff. It's too far-fetched, it's not realistic. So they become a bit too cynical, and there's like a sort of glass ceiling. Has anyone come across that? Where some people in therapy or clinical professions, they're so involved in trying to sort that problem out all the time, but they're stuck in the problem. So there's some great work that gets done, there's some great work that gets done in positive thinking, but actually you need to bridge the two. And the last point really is the power of a relationship, because Diane and I started our personal development journey separately for 3 or 4 years, and then we came together. And that was one of the massive points that accelerated that process. Because when you're living with somebody and you choose to go on that journey together, you're there reflecting each other back. And you learn to do it with love, but you do it with truth and understanding. And that, I believe, really accelerates your personal progress as well as your progress in the relationship. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight into our journeys, made you think a little bit about your own journey. If you're interested in our breakthrough experience, that's really what we deliver now. We do it face-to-face for individuals and couples, or families and family businesses. We're probably best known as relationship coaches, but again, we're really working with your relationship with yourself as two individuals, and then working on the relationship after that. The breakthrough experience we also deliver in a group environment as a retreat workshop. So I'm going to stop there and ask Di to come and join me. See if you've got any questions you'd like to ask.